Red Bull arrived at the 2026 Chinese Grand Prix, arrived at Shanghai having already told the media the team's situation plainly. The gap to Mercedes and Ferrari existed on the straights and in the corners, he explained, and the power unit was the heart of the problem, because Red Bull was still at the very beginning of that program. For a team that had won 4 consecutive drivers' championships, those words set the tone for everything that followed on Friday. Verstappen ended up 8th in sprint qualifying, somewhere between 1.7 and 1.8 seconds off Russell's benchmark, and that gap alone told a story. But the detail that sharpened it further was who finished 7th. Pierre Gasly in the Alpine, faster than the 4-time world champion. What made the practice session worse than the positions suggested was what happened to Verstappen's tyres. Within a handful of laps on the medium compound during a high fuel run, the front left tyre was gone, and that kind of degradation in a single session pointed to something deeper than a setup issue. The car was loading the tyres in ways that were fundamentally difficult to manage, and no amount of adjustment over the remaining minutes of that session was going to change the underlying cause. New Red Bull driver Isack Hadjar finished 10th, and he confirmed before the weekend that he had already taken a fresh internal combustion engine, turbocharger, exhaust and motor generator unit for China, a full new power unit allocation at just the second race of the year. Sprint qualifying at Shanghai runs across 3 segments, with the fastest 10 drivers advancing to the final shootout. What emerged from those 3 segments told a clear story about where Red Bull sits in the 2026 pecking order. Russell took sprint pole with a lap of 1 minute 31.520 seconds. Antonelli was second at plus 0.289 seconds, Norris third, Lewis Hamilton fourth for Ferrari, Oscar Piastri fifth, and Charles Leclerc sixth. Pierre Gasly put the Alpine 7th at plus 1.368 seconds. Verstappen came 8th, crossing the line at 1 minute 33.254 seconds, a gap of 1.734 seconds to pole. Behrman in the Haas sat 9th, and Hadjar rounded out the top 10 for Red Bull at 2.203 seconds off the front. Read those positions again and let them settle. An Alpine and a Haas divided the 2 Red Bulls. Gasly was 0.366 seconds faster than Verstappen. Behrman had beaten Verstappen outright in the second segment before the final shootout, and Hadjar scraped into that final session by just 0.015 seconds over Nico Hülkenberg's Audi. A brand new in-house power unit program, built from scratch for the first time in the team's history, nearly failed to put either car into the top 10 at the second race of the season. Red Bull were closer to the car that finished 12th in the previous race than they were to the car sitting on pole. Verstappen made his feelings clear throughout Friday, on the radio and in front of the cameras, and he pulled no punches in either setting. During sprint Q3, as the lap times refused to move and the car continued to slide through the corners without grip, he told his engineers directly, the car is undrivable, and he had never seen anything this poor with everything falling apart at once. A separate transmission captured him saying he simply could not accept what he was experiencing, that the car was unmanageable. After the session, he explained the nature of the problem in his own words. The whole day had been a disaster pace-wise, with no grip, no balance, and massive time lost through the corners. And once the cornering broke down, he said, everything else started to unravel with it. Technical analysis from motorsport.com confirmed the shape of that deficit. Verstappen was losing the bulk of his time through the corner sections of the circuit, not on the straights. The car had no mechanical or aerodynamic grip in medium-speed corners, and without that foundation, the rest of the lap fell apart. His engineer confirmed it on the radio during the final session. When asked if anything could be done differently, the reply was that the problem was fundamental to the car. On Thursday, at the driver's press conference, Verstappen had already signalled where his head was at. He told reporters he had swapped his simulator for a Nintendo Switch and was playing Mario Kart to prepare for the Grand Prix, which got a laugh. Then he said it was a bit conflicting because he did not enjoy driving the car, even though he enjoyed working with the people around him, and that at this moment they could not fight with the cars at the front. 2 days later, after Friday in Shanghai, he had moved to considerably stronger language. After sprint qualifying, Mekies came onto the team radio and apologised to Verstappen, telling his driver the result had nothing to do with his abilities. We obviously know that. Publicly, Mekies measured his words but stayed honest. The team had predicted they would be the fourth best outfit coming out of pre-season testing in Bahrain, he said, and the Shanghai results lined up with that prediction. The improvement needed, in his description, was a 360-degree project. Not one area. Everything. On the power unit, Mekies framed the situation as an unavoidable consequence of being new to engine manufacturing. His words to the media were direct. It would be silly to think they could arrive and immediately match Ferrari or Mercedes from the start. Hadjar, for his part, took the longer view. He said the early races simply did not matter much compared to what the car would become by the end of the year. That kind of composure from a driver in only his second Grand Prix weekend carries weight, and his engineer, Gianpiero Lambias, confirmed after the session that Hadjar's near elimination in the second segment of sprint qualifying was not down to the driver. To understand how Red Bull arrived at this position, it helps to trace what the team has lost over the past 12 months. Adrian Newey, the most decorated car designer in Formula One history, departed officially at the end of February 2025 and now serves as managing technical partner and co-owner at Aston Martin. Christian Horner was dismissed as team principal in July 2025. Helmut Marko, who shaped the team's driver program for decades as motorsport advisor, retired at the end of 2025. The head of strategy, the chief designer, and the sporting director all left during the same period. The RB22 is the first Red Bull car built entirely without Newey's involvement. Former Formula One driver Ralf Schumacher put it plainly, Pierre Wash is simply not Adrian Newey. Sky Sports analyst Karun Chandhok made the point that cuts to the centre of the problem. The architects of the decision to build a power unit in-house, which meant Newey, Horner and Marko, are all gone. The people who committed the team to that path are not the ones managing its consequences. Verstappen said before the season that the new cars felt like Formula E on steroids. 2 races in, his language had become considerably less forgiving. Sky Sports F1 analyst Bernie Collins reviewed Verstappen's Friday radio transmissions and reached a straightforward conclusion. There are no quick fixes for what Red Bull are dealing with, and the problems are fundamental to the car. Verstappen holds a contract with Red Bull that runs until the end of 2028. But that agreement contains performance-linked clauses that grow more relevant with each race weekend. Reporting from Newsweek, Sky Sports, and SportBuild indicates that Verstappen can activate an exit clause, allowing him to leave without compensation if he sits second or lower in the 2026 Drivers' Championship at the end of July 2026. Without triggering such a clause, the estimated buyout figure sits around $100 million. Before the season, Marko addressed the situation without ambiguity. They could not hold Max to the team if the new engine failed to deliver. Verstappen himself said he did not want to leave, but he also said before the season that he could not see himself touring around in the midfield for 3 years. After what happened in Shanghai on Friday, with a gap of 1.734 seconds to pole and a Haas sitting between his car and his teammates, that comparison to the midfield is no longer a hypothetical. The sprint race and full qualifying are still ahead this weekend, and every session adds more data to the picture. But based on everything that happened in Shanghai on Friday, the answer to the question this video asks is sitting considerably closer to yes than anyone at Red Bull would like to acknowledge right now. If you want to follow how this season unfolds and whether Red Bull can find their way back to the front, subscribe and stay with the channel. And please drop your thoughts in the comments below.